For years, Valerie Bertinelli rarely rushed to correct the public narrative surrounding her marriage to Eddie Van Halen. From the outside, their relationship looked like a classic story of young love between a television sweetheart and a rock icon. Headlines often reduced their journey to a glamorous romance that simply ran its course. But real relationships, especially those lived under a spotlight, are rarely that simple. When two people from dramatically different worlds come together, the challenges they face are often invisible to everyone else. Valerie built her early career on stability and relatability, becoming a comforting presence in American households. Eddie, on the other hand, was redefining rock music with explosive creativity and living inside an industry known for excess and relentless touring. Their connection was genuine and intense, yet intensity alone cannot prepare two young people for the pressures of fame, expectation, and personal struggle. Over time, what looked magical from a distance required far more emotional endurance than most observers realized. When they first met, the attraction between them felt immediate and almost cinematic. Valerie was still very young, optimistic about love and eager to build a life grounded in commitment. Eddie was already immersed in the demanding rhythm of international tour, studio sessions, and the culture that surrounded rock stardom. They married quickly, guided by emotion more than long-term planning. In many ways, they represented opposites that seemed to balance each other, structure meeting spontaneity, predictability meeting artistic chaos. Yet differences that feel exciting at the beginning of a relationship can become complicated over time. The music industry of that era moved at a relentless pace, and stability was difficult to maintain. While fans celebrated sold-out shows and groundbreaking albums, the private realities of maintaining a marriage under those circumstances were far more complex. Both were navigating adulthood in real time, learning about themselves while also trying to sustain a partnership. That combination can be overwhelming for any couple, especially when millions of people are watching from afar. As the years passed, it became clear that love was only one part of their story. Addiction entered the picture gradually, not as a single dramatic event, but as a pattern that reshaped daily life. Valerie would later describe how addiction rarely announces itself loudly at first. Instead, it alters routines, conversations, and emotional safety little by little. Supporting a partner through substance struggles requires enormous emotional labor. There are hopeful stretches, moments of recovery that feel like turning points, followed by setbacks that reopen old wounds. For Valerie, this meant stepping into roles she may never have anticipated: caretaker, protector, stabilizer. Meanwhile, Eddie was not simply a public figure. He was a person grappling with pressures that fame often intensifies. The challenge in such situations is that both partners can love each other deeply while still feeling increasingly disconnected. The outside world continued to see success and glamour, but internally, the marriage was becoming more about crisis management than shared joy. Health challenges added another layer of strain. When Eddie was diagnosed with cancer, the news was frightening for everyone close to him. Serious illness has a way of clarifying priorities, at least temporarily. For a moment, there was renewed hope that fear might inspire lasting change. Facing mortality can shift perspectives, but sustainable transformation requires ongoing commitment. Valerie has spoken about the complicated emotions that surfaced during that time: fear, love, frustration, and exhaustion all existing at once. Supporting a spouse through major medical treatment while carrying unresolved issues from the past can be emotionally overwhelming. In moments like these, couples often confront not only illness, but also the deeper foundations of their relationship. The question becomes whether shared history and affection are enough to rebuild trust and stability. For Valerie, those years were marked by both devotion and a growing realization that something essential between them had already begun to fade. Parenthood remained a powerful bond between them. Welcoming their son created a shared purpose that transcended marital strain. Both Valerie and Eddie cared deeply about being present as parents, even when their romantic connection weakened. Sometimes, couples who struggle as partners can still succeed in maintaining mutual respect as co-parents. Over time, however, it became evident that their marriage was evolving into something different: less romantic partnership, more familial alliance. There were no explosive public confrontations announcing the shift. Instead, the change unfolded quietly. By the late 1990s, the relationship had lost much of its original intimacy. This kind of gradual unraveling can be more difficult to process than a dramatic ending because there is no single moment to point to as the cause. It is the accumulation of years, compromises, disappointments, and attempts to repair what keeps breaking. Sometimes the hardest realization is that love still exists, but the relationship itself no longer functions in a healthy way. When their separation eventually became public, many observers expected scandal or dramatic revelations. Instead, what emerged was a tone of mutual respect. They described each other as friends and remained connected through their son. The absence of public blame confused some people who were used to celebrity breakups filled with accusations. Yet not every marriage ends because of a single betrayal. Some end because the emotional environment has changed beyond repair. Valerie later reflected that she had reached a point of deep exhaustion. Living in a constant state of vigilance, wondering when the next crisis might occur, can slowly erode a person's sense of self. Choosing to leave under those circumstances is rarely impulsive. It often follows years of effort, hope, and internal conflict. From the outside, the separation may have looked calm. Internally, it represented a difficult acknowledgement that the marriage had quietly run out of stability. In the years that followed, Valerie processed the end of her marriage in her own way. Like many people, she initially framed the relationship as a powerful love story that simply could not survive external pressures. Describing a former partner as a soulmate can make loss easier to bear. It allows room for honoring the good memories without dwelling entirely on the painful ones. Over time, however, deeper reflection brought greater clarity. She began to recognize that romanticizing the past sometimes obscured important truths. A healthy partnership requires emotional safety, mutual accountability, and consistent presence. Without those elements, even genuine affection may not be enough. Acknowledging that reality does not erase the love that once existed. It simply places it in context. Growth often involves revisiting old narratives and reshaping them into something more honest, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. After Eddie's passing, Valerie spoke with a tone that blended grief and perspective. She honored the meaningful years they shared and the family they created, while also admitting that their marriage had changed long before it formally ended. Love, she explained, can transform. What once feels romantic can evolve into something familial, rooted in shared history rather than partnership. This distinction is important because it challenges the idea that every lasting connection must remain romantic to be meaningful. In many ways, her reflections were less about revisiting old pain and more about embracing personal growth. Therapy, self-awareness, and time allowed her to understand her own patterns, including the tendency to endure more than was healthy. That recognition is not about assigning blame. It is about understanding how two people can care deeply for each other and still be unable to sustain a balanced marriage. The broader lesson in their story resonates beyond celebrity culture. Many marriages do not end with explosive conflict. They conclude quietly after years of gradual change. Emotional disconnection, unresolved struggles, and shifting identities can accumulate until staying feels more damaging than leaving. Valerie has emphasized that walking away was not an act of anger, but an act of self-preservation. Choosing personal well-being does not automatically negate the love that once existed. Instead, it acknowledges that relationships require more than history and hope. They require shared growth and consistent effort from both sides. When those elements disappear, separation can become a necessary step toward healing. Ultimately, the story of Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen is not one of scandal, but of complexity. It reflects how fame can magnify personal struggles and how devotion can coexist with exhaustion. Their marriage produced profound joy, deep lessons, and a son who remains a living connection between them. It also required an honesty that arrived only with time. Whether a marriage ends after 2 years or 20, its conclusion does not automatically define it as a failure. Sometimes it marks the moment when two people recognize that love, while real, is no longer enough to sustain a healthy life together.